This was back in January 2017, so not that long ago. I live in a pretty isolated farmhouse in rural Ohio. My parents had gone down to Florida for a week to visit my aunt, so I had the place to myself. That never really bothered me. I was 24 then and used to the quiet. But that particular night the weather was turning ugly. They'd forecast an ice storm, and by 8 p.m. it was in full swing. Sleet hammered the windows like handfuls of gravel. It wasn't fluffy snow. It was that dense, wet ice that clings to everything. Around 9:30 p.m., what I'd been dreading happened. I was on the couch in the living room watching YouTube on the TV when everything just cut out. Total, instant silence. The furnace, the TV, everything died in a single snap. I sat in the dark for a few seconds, waiting to see if the power would flicker back on. It didn't. I pulled out my phone and used the flashlight to pick my way to the kitchen. We keep emergency candles and a heavy-duty flashlight in the junk drawer. As soon as the lights were gone, the whole house felt different. We're way out in the country, and when the power goes, it is absolute black. Can't see your hand in front of your face black. With the snow and ice piling up outside, the house was unnaturally quiet too. The snow muffled what little noise ever comes from the road, which is a mile away anyway. It felt like sitting inside a vacuum. I lit a couple candles and sat at the kitchen island, scrolling on my phone. I had around 60% battery left, and thankfully the cell towers were still up, so I had data. I texted my parents that the power was out. They told me to bundle up and stay inside. About 20 minutes went by. The temperature inside was already dropping. That's when my phone buzzed in my hand. Motion detected at back door. It was a notification from our smart home security app. My heart skipped, but I tried to stay rational. We had a camera aimed at the back deck, and it loved to pick up deer and raccoons, especially in winter when they come close looking for food. Sometimes even heavy snow blowing past the sensor sets it off. I opened the app and checked the live feed. The video struggled to load, and when it finally did, the quality was awful. The power outage meant the camera was running off its backup battery, and with the Wi-Fi down, it was trying to push video over a weak cellular backup. The image was just chaos, gray and white static. The night vision was on, but the snow was swirling so hard it bounced the infrared light right back, making a glowing wall of white noise. I squinted, trying to pick out the deck through the mess. There was a shape there, a dark blotch near the railing, but it was too smeared to identify. It could have been a bush whipping in the wind. I tapped the screen to refresh. The loading wheel spun, then the feed went black. Camera offline. I figured the cold had killed the battery or the signal finally gave up in the storm. Still, that dark shape nagged at me. I needed to know the back door was locked. I was 99% sure I'd locked it earlier, but anxiety doesn't care about percentages. I stood and walked toward the back of the kitchen. The back door is a sliding glass door leading out to the wooden deck. I didn't turn my flashlight on. I didn't want to blind myself with the reflection off the glass, so I just used the dim glow from my phone screen. The air got noticeably colder as I approached. The glass was radiating the outside chill. Warm indoor air had condensed on the inside of the door, building a thick fog of moisture so I couldn't see anything out there. All I saw was a dull gray pane. I reached for the latch and felt it. Locked. I let out a breath I hadn't even realized I was holding and told myself I was being stupid. It was a deer. It was always a deer. Then I froze. Right in front of my face on the other side of the glass, something moved. I watched in absolute horror as a hand pressed flat against the door from outside. Pale palm, long fingers splayed, pushing hard enough to make the glass creak. The hand moved slowly, wiping away the condensation and frost on its side of the door. It cleared a round patch of glass exactly at my eye level. An eye appeared in the circle. I was standing less than a foot away. I found myself staring straight into a wide, unblinking human eye. The pupil was blown wide and wild. It didn't dart around. It didn't scan the room. It locked onto me. He knew I was there. He had been waiting for me to come check the door. I screamed. I stumbled backward, my socks skating on the hardwood. I went down hard on my hip but barely registered the impact. I scrambled back up and bolted out of the kitchen. Behind me, something slammed into the glass, his body, full force, throwing itself against the door like he was trying to shove it off the tracks. I sprinted to the downstairs bathroom, the only room on the first floor with a solid door and no windows. I slammed it shut, twisted the lock, and wedged myself into the narrow space between the toilet and the sink. My hands shook so violently, I almost dropped my phone twice before I managed to dial 911. The operator answered, but the connection was cutting in and out. I whispered that there was a man trying to break into my house and gave her my address. She told me road conditions were terrible and response times would be delayed, but to stay on the line and stay hidden. While I whispered into the phone, the pounding on the back door suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I had no idea if he'd given up or just gone looking for another way in. Time stretched. It felt like hours, but later I realized it was maybe 10 minutes. I sat there shaking, trying to hear past the roar of my own heartbeat. Then I heard it, a slow, heavy, wet crunch. Footsteps on the front porch. The old wood out there always creaks, even under snow. He was circling the house. The front doorknob rattled violently. He yanked it over and over, trying to brute force his way through the lock. I held my breath. I knew the deadbolt on that door was old and not exactly reliable. A split second later, a crash exploded through the house. It was the sharp sound of glass shattering. The living room window. He was inside. 911, he's in the house, I whispered, my voice barely coming out. I heard glass break. The operator told me officers were about 5 minutes away. 5 minutes is an eternity when you can hear a stranger's boots in your living room. I heard heavy steps crunching on broken glass. He wasn't sneaking. He was stomping around. Something, maybe a lamp, clattered to the floor. Then I heard his voice. "Come on out, I just want to get warm." His voice was rough and raspy like a lifelong smoker's, and he was saying it in this mocking, sing-song tone. He moved into the hallway leading straight toward the bathroom. Light from his flashlight swept across the crack at the bottom of the door. I saw the dark outline of his boots stop directly in front of it. The doorknob turned slowly until it hit the lock with a click. Then he rattled it. He threw his shoulder into the door. The wood splintered a little, but the frame held. "I know you're in there," he mumbled. He hit the door again, right as sirens cut through the storm. Not distant ones, but close, sharp chirps of a cruiser pulling into our gravel driveway. The man froze. "Damn it," he snapped. I heard him run back down the hallway toward the living room. A moment later, muffled shouts, "Police! Show me your hands!" There was the sound of a struggle, the crackle of a taser deploying, then a heavy thud. The officers cleared the house and finally opened the bathroom door. I came out shaking, barely able to stand. The man they arrested was named Travis, a local drifter who'd been released from prison about 2 weeks earlier for burglary and aggravated assault. He was high on meth and had been wandering the woods when he spotted our house. The part that still chills me isn't just that he tried to get in. It's what the officers told us afterward. When they checked the tracks in the snow, they found he hadn't walked up to the deck right before I got that motion alert. His footprints showed he'd been standing on the back deck for over an hour. Just standing there in the dark, watching the house, waiting for the power to fail and the cameras to cut out. I moved out of that farmhouse 3 months later. Now I live on the 3rd floor of an apartment complex. I avoid ground floor windows, and I don't like the dark anymore. Before we get into the next story, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you don't miss any of our upcoming scary stories. A few years later, in the winter of 2023, I was working as a delivery driver for DoorDash. I was living in a small town in Minnesota. Winters there are brutal, but that's when the money's best. No one wants to go out, so surge pricing goes insane. It was a Tuesday night in February, right in the middle of a bad snowstorm. Visibility was trash and the roads were slick sheets of ice. I was broke and rent was due, so I decided I'd stay online until midnight no matter what. Around 10:45 p.m., I got a ping. Large order from a local steakhouse, payout just shy of $40 for a 5-mile drive. I accepted instantly, barely glancing at the map. I picked up the food, it smelled amazing, and followed the GPS. It took me away from the town center and out toward the rural outskirts where houses are scattered and half hidden by trees. The farther I drove, the worse the roads got. By the time I turned onto the customer street, my car was the only one out there. Snow fell in thick curtains, almost hypnotic in the headlights. When I reached the address, my stomach dropped. This wasn't a normal house. It was a big 2-story colonial way back from the road. The driveway snaked up a hill for at least 100 yards, and it hadn't been plowed at all. A good foot of fresh snow buried it. I drive a Honda Civic. There was zero chance I'd make it up that hill without getting stuck. I texted the customer, "Hey, this is your driver. I can't get up the driveway. Can you meet me at the bottom?" I waited 5 minutes. No reply. I called. Straight to voicemail. I sighed. I really didn't want to cancel and lose that $40, so I decided I'd just walk it. I pulled my hood up, grabbed the heavy paper bag of food, and stepped into the snow. Before I started the long trudge, I checked the delivery instructions again in case there was a gate code. The note made me stop. "Leave at front door. Do not knock or ring the bell. Dogs will bark. Do not look in the windows." The first part was normal enough. Lots of people don't want you waking pets or kids. But that last line, "Do not look in the windows," hit me wrong. It sounded like it belonged in a horror story, not in a delivery app. The walk up the driveway was miserable. The wind sliced at my face and snow seeped into my boots. By the time the house finally came into view, my lungs burned and my fingers were numb. The place was completely dark. No porch light, no glow from any upstairs windows, nothing. It looked abandoned. If not for a set of older tire tracks in the snow, probably from earlier that day, I would have assumed I had the wrong place. I climbed the icy front steps carefully, set the bag on the doormat, and took the required proof of delivery photo with the app. As I straightened up, the delivery note flashed through my mind again. "Do not look in the windows," which of course made me want to look even more. To the right of the front door was a huge bay window jutting out from what had to be the living room. No curtains, no blinds, just one big sheet of glass, reflecting a faint ghost of my own shape. I told myself to just turn around and leave. Instead, I glanced over. The living room was empty, completely empty. No couch, no TV, no rugs, no lamps, just bare hardwood floors, except for one thing. Standing dead center in the room was a mannequin, a male mannequin in a gray suit. It wasn't in a pose. It stood stiff and straight, arms at its sides, facing the window. Facing me. My first thought was that it was some kind of weird art piece, or the owners were moving and had dumped it there for storage. But the longer I stared, the less normal it felt. The room was so empty that the mannequin looked wrong, like a single piece of a person left behind. Even without features, just that smooth plastic face, it somehow felt like it was watching me. The whole scene, the silent woods, the dark house, the creepy note, the lone mannequin, hit me all at once. I turned away quickly, deciding I'd had enough. "Just get back to the car," I muttered to myself. I hit the bottom step and my boot landed on a patch of hidden black ice. My feet flew out and I crashed onto my back on the driveway. Pain flared in my elbow. I groaned and sat there for a second in the snow, dazed and embarrassed, hoping nobody had seen me eat it on the ice. I stood up, brushed the snow off my clothes, and instinctively looked back at the house to see if any lights had flicked on from the noise. The house was still pitch black, but the bay window wasn't the same. My blood ran cold. The mannequin was no longer standing in the center of the room. It was pressed against the glass. Upright, not toppled, its plastic forehead touching the inside of the window, shoulders hunched slightly forward, as if it were leaning over the porch. It was towering over the spot where I'd just been standing seconds earlier. I froze for half a heartbeat as my brain tried and failed to calculate how an inanimate object had crossed 20 feet of empty floor while I was lying in the snow. Then adrenaline took over. I didn't scream. I just ran. I tore down that unplowed driveway, knees high, slipping and sliding with every step. I didn't look back. I could practically feel eyes on my neck, like something was about to grab my hood. I dove into my car, slammed the door, and hit the lock button over and over. My hands shook so badly I dropped my keys onto the floor mat. I scrabbled for them, jammed them into the ignition, and floored it in reverse. I nearly slid into the ditch turning around, but I didn't care. I didn't feel safe until I was back on the main road under the streetlights. I called DoorDash support and reported the drop-off as unsafe, but I left out the part about the mannequin. I knew how crazy that would sound. I just said the driveway was dangerous and the property unlit. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I drove past that road during daylight to see if the house seemed any less creepy. There was a for sale sign at the end of the driveway. The wood looked warped and weathered like it had been there forever. When I got home, I looked up the address on Zillow. The listing said the place had been vacant and on the market for over a year. The photos showed the same bare living room. No furniture, no mannequin. I still don't know who ordered that steak dinner, or how a mannequin can cross a room on its own. I just know I never deliver to that side of town anymore. I was driving along Interstate 80 through Wyoming, trying to get home for the holidays, when the weather turned on me. It started with a light flurry. Within 20 minutes it was a full whiteout. I couldn't see the hood of my own car, let alone the lane lines. Everyone else was struggling too. Up ahead, brake lights flared, then stopped. Words started trickling through CB chatter and hazard flashers. A semi had jackknifed across both lanes about a mile ahead. Traffic ground to a complete halt. At first I sat there with the radio on, figuring they'd clear it up soon enough. They didn't. The snow kept falling, piling higher against the tires. By midnight, I'd been sitting in the exact same spot for 4 hours. Terrified of running out of gas, I started a routine. Engine on for 10 minutes to blast the heat, then off for 45 to conserve fuel. It wasn't pleasant. As soon as I cut the engine, the temperature inside dropped brutally fast. I had on my winter coat, hat, and gloves, and I still couldn't stop shivering. The highway was surreal, jammed with cars but almost completely silent. Most people had turned off their headlights to save their batteries. It looked like a graveyard of buried vehicles. To my left was a concrete barrier. To my right, an older dark green sedan looked like a rusted-out Honda. Its windows were dark. I hadn't seen its engine turn on once in hours. Snow was mounded thick on the roof and hood. I figured whoever was inside was either asleep or stuck with a dead battery, just freezing and praying like the rest of us. I tried to sleep, but the cold and anxiety wouldn't let me. I kept checking my phone, but there was no service at all on that stretch of highway. At exactly 2:13 a.m., I was wide awake, rubbing my hands together to get some feeling back, when I saw movement in my peripheral vision. The driver's door of the green Honda next to me creaked open. I sat up straight. The wind outside was howling, easily 30 miles per hour, and the temperature had dropped below zero. Wind chill must have been worse. A man stepped out of the sedan. He looked completely wrong for the weather. He wore a faded graphic t-shirt and jeans. No coat, no hat, no gloves, just canvas sneakers disappearing into the deep snow. I stared, confused. I thought maybe his car had died and he was coming over to ask for help or a jump. But he never even glanced at me. Instead, he walked past my car to the SUV parked in front of the Honda. He reached for the door handle, gave it a gentle tug. Locked. He didn't knock on the window. Didn't lean down to say anything. Just moved on to the next vehicle, a pickup truck, and tried the handle there. Also locked. He was moving in a slow, methodical pattern, going car to car, testing each handle. The strangest part was his body language. He wasn't hunched against the wind or shielding his face. He walked upright, relaxed, like he was strolling through a mall instead of wading through a blizzard in sub-zero temperatures. After he checked 3 cars and found them all locked, he turned around and headed back in my direction. My heart slammed against my ribs. I double-checked my locks, pressing the button again and again just to hear it click. He walked right up to my driver's side window. I flinched back toward the passenger seat. The snow whipped around him, but the glow from my dash lit his face clearly through the glass. He was smiling. It was a wide, unnatural grin that showed too many teeth. His eyes were huge and unblinking, locked directly on mine. He didn't speak. Instead, he lifted something he'd been holding in his right hand, a greasy piece of cardboard like the lid of a pizza box. Thick black marker covered it. "Let me in. I'm cold." I stared at the words, then at his face. He wasn't shivering. That detail made my stomach drop. It was at least 10 below zero. I was shivering inside my car with the heater off and a thick coat on. This guy was standing in a t-shirt and jeans with snow up to his ankles, and he looked fine. Too fine. No pale skin, no blue lips, no goosebumps, just that fixed, hungry smile. He tapped one finger on the glass lightly. Tap, tap. Then he pressed the cardboard closer to the window. "Let me in. I'm cold." I shook my head hard. "No," I mouthed, even though he couldn't hear me through the glass and the wind. "Get away." His expression didn't change. He just tilted his head to the side, almost curious, like he was watching an animal behind glass. Then he reached down and tried my door handle. It lifted with a soft click, but the lock held. He didn't yank on it again. He just released it, held my gaze one last time with that frozen grin, lowered the sign and turned away. He walked calmly back to his green Honda, opened the driver's door, slid in and shut it. I grabbed the tire iron from under my back seat and kept it gripped in my hands for the rest of the night, staring at that car. I never saw the door open again. I never saw the engine start. No interior lights. Nothing. Around 7 o'clock a.m., the plows finally reached us and started clearing the lanes. A highway patrol officer walked down the line of cars checking on people. I rolled my window down as he got close. I was exhausted and buzzing with leftover adrenaline. "Officer," I said, pointing at the green Honda, "the guy in that car, he's dangerous. He tried to get into my car last night." The officer looked over at the sedan. It was buried in snow almost up to the windows. "That one?" he asked. "Yeah, he got out around 2, just a t-shirt, no coat, he's crazy." The officer frowned and trudged over to the Honda. He brushed the snow off the driver's side window and peered inside. Then he tried the handle. It opened easily. He pulled the door fully open and looked around the interior. "The car's empty," he called back. "No one in here. No keys in the ignition either." "He has to be," I stammered. I watched him get back in. The officer checked the glove box and came back a few minutes later. "This car was reported stolen 3 days ago," he said. "Belongs to a pizza delivery driver out of Omaha. Looks like whoever took it ran it out of gas and ditched it when traffic stopped." He glanced toward the empty fields. "If he was walking around out here in a t-shirt last night, he's probably frozen to death in the woods by now." They never found a body. But I know what I saw, and I know he wasn't shivering.